After I woke up from emergency surgery alone in the ICU, I called my husband and begged him to come to the hospital. He texted back, "I'm at the company retreat with Megan. Can't leave now. It would look bad." I replied, "Okay." What the HR director said when she reviewed the security footage from that weekend made him wish he had never sent that text. The message arrived while I was still groggy from anesthesia, my body fighting to recover from surgery that had nearly killed me. Can't leave the retreat. Megan needs help with her presentation tomorrow. Take an Uber home when they discharge you. Sorry, babe. I stared at my husband's words through tears that had nothing to do with physical pain, my surgical incision throbbing with every shallow breath, and typed back with trembling fingers, "Okay." That single word would end our 7-year marriage, though Kevin didn't know it yet. He was too busy helping Megan Turner perfect her PowerPoint slides at the Lakeside Resort to realize his wife was lying in Memorial General's intensive care unit, choosing between despair and morphine. The nurses had asked me 4 times if they could call someone else. Anyone else. But I kept staring at that message, reading it over and over like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. My husband of 7 years had just suggested I take an Uber home from the ICU after emergency surgery that could have killed me because Megan Turner, his project partner with the designer wardrobe and the endless work emergencies, needed him more. This morning felt like a different lifetime now. I'd stood in our kitchen at 6:15 making Kevin's coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 shots of espresso, splash of oat milk, 1 raw sugar. 7 years of making the same coffee, and I could do it without thinking. My hands knew the motions while my mind wandered to the quarterly review meeting that afternoon where I'd present the campaign I'd spent 3 months perfecting. Kevin had promised to be there. Or rather, he'd said he'd try. Megan's freaking out about the retreat. He'd announced over breakfast, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. The soft smile playing at his lips was the one I used to see when I'd walk into a room. Now it belonged to her text messages. Another crisis? I'd kept my voice neutral while pouring his coffee with perhaps more force than necessary. The venue changed some details last minute. She's panicking. You know how she gets. Megan had been panicking for 8 months now. Strange how the panic only seemed to occur when Kevin had free time. Strange how it never quite escalated to actually involving anyone else from their team. I'd wanted to point out these inconsistencies, but I'd learned that defending Megan was Kevin's new religion. Instead, I'd reminded him about my presentation. His response was predictable. "I'll try to make it, but if Megan needs me for retreat prep, she would need him. She always did lately." The thing about the work partnership was that it had started so innocently, I couldn't even be properly angry at first. 8 months ago, Kevin had brought Megan to our anniversary dinner. She was new to the company, didn't know anyone in Denver yet, and Kevin wanted to make her feel welcome. I'd watched from across the table as she touched his arm while laughing at something he said. The gesture was casual, intimate, familiar. Kevin had straightened his tie when she complimented it. A peacock preening for attention. Megan's going through a rough transition, he'd explained that night. She left her whole life in Chicago for this job. She doesn't have anyone else in town she can really talk to. 1 lunch became 2. Monthly became weekly. 1 hour stretched to 3. Always when I was in meetings or traveling for work, times when I wouldn't notice his absence. I tried talking to him about it last month. We were lying in bed and I could smell her perfume on his jacket, something expensive and citrusy that made our bedroom smell like a department store. "Do you think Megan might be taking advantage of your helpfulness?" I'd asked carefully. Kevin had turned to look at me with such genuine surprise that for a moment I wondered if I was wrong. Taking advantage? "Rachel, she's drowning at work. Her last company was toxic. She has anxiety about failing here. She needs support. She has a therapist. She has friends back in Chicago. She has other colleagues. But she trusts me," Kevin had said, as if that explained everything. As if her trust was more important than our marriage. Kevin's mother, Barbara, had cornered me at our wedding reception 7 years ago. She'd had too much champagne, and her words came with the sharp edges of truth that alcohol tends to reveal. "You're good for him," she'd said, not as a compliment but as an assessment. "Kevin needs someone ambitious, someone who won't let him coast. You'll push him to be better." I thought she was welcoming me to the family. Now I understood she'd been hiring me for a position. Kevin's motivator, the ambitious one who worked 60-hour weeks while he played at being a team player, taking 3-hour lunches without consequence. The morning before the surgery, I'd watched Kevin get ready for the retreat with unusual attention. He wore the blue button-down Megan had complimented last week, the one I'd given him for his birthday that had lived in his closet until she mentioned how it matched his eyes. His cologne was stronger than usual. He packed his bag with unusual precision. Excited for the retreat? I'd asked. Just work, he'd replied, and we both knew what that meant. I'd left for the office thinking about when we'd stopped really seeing each other. When did I become background noise in my own marriage? When did his phone become more interesting than conversations with his wife? The questions followed me through my morning routine, through the lunch I ate alone at my desk, through the afternoon that would end with me collapsed in a conference room bathroom, my appendix rupturing while I clutched the cold tile floor. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent the morning reviewing the retreat schedule Megan had sent to the whole department. The same retreat she'd planned for 8 months of escalating emergencies that never seemed to resolve. The same retreat that gave her a reason to text my husband at all hours with questions about logistics and last-minute changes. Now, lying in the ICU with monitors beeping around me, I thought about all the evenings I'd come home to find Kevin already asleep or pretending to be. The credit card charges at restaurants that were always just a little too expensive for work lunches. The way he'd started keeping his phone face down during dinner. Dr. Patel appeared at my bedside, her expression carefully professional. "Mrs. Anderson, we've tried calling your husband 4 more times. The calls are going straight to voicemail now." He turned off his phone rather than be interrupted during his retreat with Megan. The recognition of that fact settled over me like a blanket made of ice. Kevin had actively chosen to be unreachable while his wife lay in the ICU after emergency surgery. "Dr. Patel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the medication making everything feel distant and foggy. "I know exactly where my husband is. The Lakewood Resort, about 2 hours north. He's at the company retreat with Megan Turner." I paused, tasting the salt of tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "Would you mind having someone reach out through official channels? I'm worried he doesn't understand how serious this was." Dr. Patel studied my face for a moment, and I saw understanding dawn in her expression. "We can certainly do that, Mrs. Anderson." "The Lakewood Resort, you said?" "The company retreat. Our whole marketing department is there. Except me. My quarterly presentation had happened without me. While I was being rushed into emergency surgery, my slides were being presented by someone else. The irony felt like another kind of wound. The day before had started so normally. Morning coffee with Kevin, who was distracted by his phone. A productive morning at the office finishing last-minute adjustments to my presentation. Lunch at my desk. Just a salad because I was too nervous about the afternoon to eat much. The pain started around 2, a dull ache that I assumed was stress. By 3, it had sharpened into something that made me grip the edge of my desk. By 3:30, I was in the bathroom on the floor, unable to stand, my phone just out of reach on the counter where I'd left it. Melissa from accounting found me at 4. She'd needed to use the bathroom before leaving for the retreat and had heard me moaning through the door. The next few hours were a blur of ambulances and questions and needles and that terrible moment when Dr. Patel's face went serious. "Your appendix has ruptured. We need to operate immediately. Is there someone we can call?" I gave them Kevin's number while part of my brain screamed that he wouldn't answer. That the retreat preparations would be more important than his wife's actual emergency. That Megan's anxiety about her presentation was sacred while my emergency surgery was inconvenient. The recovery room ceiling tiles came into focus slowly as the anesthesia wore off. Someone had tried to make them cheerful once, painting them in soft colors, but years of fluorescent light had faded them into something institutional and sad. I counted them while the medication made everything swim. Dr. Patel appeared again with her tablet, scrolling through something with a frown. "We reached the resort. Your husband was informed of the situation." She paused in a way that told me there was more. "He said he'd try to make it tomorrow, after Megan's presentation." I wanted to laugh, but my surgical incision wouldn't allow it. After her presentation, I'd nearly died, and Kevin had penciled me in for tomorrow, after helping his work partner practice her slides one more time. Did he say anything else? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow. Accepting. Dr. Patel's professional mask slipped just slightly. "He asked if you could have your sister pick you up when you're discharged. Something about the retreat being important for his career." Career. 8 months of Megan being more important than our marriage had been about career advancement. As if she held some key to his professional future that I couldn't possibly understand. The text message arrived while Dr. Patel was adjusting my IV. Kevin's name lighting up my phone like a warning signal. Sorry, I couldn't come. Megan needs me tonight to run through her slides. This presentation could get me noticed by the executives. You understand. We'll make it up to you. Love you. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. The post-surgery drugs must be affecting my reading comprehension. Surely my husband of 7 years hadn't just said a PowerPoint presentation was more important than my emergency surgery. Surely he hadn't prioritized Megan's career anxiety over his wife's actual medical crisis. But there it was in black and white. Words that managed to capture everything wrong with our marriage in a single message. The casual dismissal, the prioritization of someone else's manufactured importance, the empty promise to make it up to me like missing a dinner reservation instead of missing his wife's near-death experience. Something broke inside my chest as I stared at that message. Not my heart exactly, though that was certainly involved. It was bigger than that, more structural. The framework that had held my life together for 7 years. The basic belief that when it really mattered, when everything was falling apart, Kevin would choose me, would choose us, would remember the vows he'd made in front of our families. My phone rang. Emily, my older sister, her face appearing on the screen with her characteristic worried expression. Rachel, I just got a call from Memorial General. What happened? Are you okay? I'm stable. Emergency appendectomy. I'm in the ICU, but they're moving me to a regular room soon. I'm on my way. Give me 2 hours. Emily lived in Colorado Springs, close enough to reach me but far enough that the drive would give her time to process. Is Kevin there? The pause before my answer told her everything. Where is he? Company retreat. With Megan. The silence on Emily's end was longer than any words could have been. She'd warned me about Kevin years ago, gently at first, then more insistently as the patterns became obvious. She'd never liked how he made everything about himself, how he somehow managed to be unavailable whenever I needed him most. I'll be there in 2 hours, she said finally. And Rachel, don't let them discharge you until I get there. You're coming to stay with me until you recover. The curtain around my bed rustled and Emily walked in looking like she'd broken several traffic laws to get here. My older sister still wore her yoga clothes, probably interrupted mid-class when the hospital called. Her face, usually set in her instructor's calm expression, was carved from something harder. 3 hours, she said, crossing to my bedside in quick strides. 3 hours. I've been driving, thinking about how I was going to support you through recovery. Her hand found mine, gentle despite the anger radiating from her. Then I call Kevin to let him know I'm handling things and he says, and I quote, "Great, that's a relief. I really need to focus on Megan's presentation tomorrow." Emily, don't. Rachel, just don't. Show me his texts. I handed her my phone, watching her face transform as she read Kevin's messages. The progression was almost theatrical. Disbelief, anger, then something colder and more calculated that I recognized from her divorce 3 years ago. This was Emily in protection mode. 7 years, she muttered, still scrolling. 7 years I've watched him make you feel like you're not enough. But this. She looked up, her eyes bright with something between fury and determination. This is unforgivable. She pulled out her own phone, fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. What are you doing? Texting my lawyer, the one who handled my divorce. She's brilliant, and she hates men like Kevin. Emily, I don't know if... Rachel, your husband chose a PowerPoint presentation over your emergency surgery. There's no coming back from that. My phone buzzed. A text from someone unexpected. Jessica Palmer, the HR director at our company. A woman I knew professionally but had never interacted with socially. Rachel, I heard you're in the hospital after emergency surgery. I'm so sorry. The retreat team just found out and everyone sends their thoughts. Please let me know if you need anything from the company side. Extended leave, whatever you need. Something about her message struck me as odd. The retreat team just found out. Kevin had known for hours. Had he not told anyone? A second message followed immediately. I don't want to overstep, but I think you should know that Kevin has been telling people you had a minor procedure and didn't want to worry anyone. He said you insisted he stay for Megan's presentation. I'm getting a different picture from the hospital's outreach. My hands trembled as I read it. Kevin hadn't just abandoned me. He'd actively constructed a narrative where I had released him from his husbandly duties. Where I had chosen to handle this alone so his important work could continue. Emily was reading over my shoulder, her expression darkening with each word. He lied to your entire department to justify staying with her, she said quietly. Jessica's the HR director, Rachel. She has access to everything. A third message arrived. I've asked the resort security team to send me footage from this evening. Company policy requires documentation when employees are at official events. Just want to make sure our records match what's being reported. We'll be in touch. Something shifted in my chest. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. Jessica Palmer was building a case. Whether for HR purposes or something else, she was documenting the gap between Kevin's story and reality. I should tell her the truth, I said. Tell her everything, Emily agreed. The texts, the timeline, all of it. I typed carefully, my surgical incision protesting the movement. Jessica, I want to be transparent. I had emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix at 4 p.m. The hospital notified Kevin at 5:30 p.m. He chose not to come. He suggested I take an Uber home when I'm discharged. I did not tell him to stay at the retreat. I begged him to come. I have the texts. Her response came within seconds. Can you forward those texts to me? Company email is fine. I think we need to have a conversation when you're feeling better. I forwarded everything. Every message where Kevin mentioned Megan. Every excuse about work emergencies that kept him from coming home on time. Every text from the past 3 days showing the timeline of his abandonment. Emily watched over my shoulder, occasionally pointing out messages I'd forgotten, building a pattern that was undeniable when viewed all together. 2 hours later, while Emily was in the cafeteria getting us both terrible coffee, my phone rang. Jessica Palmer. Rachel, I want you to focus on recovering. Everything else can wait. But I thought you should know. She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. The security footage from the resort shows Kevin and Megan leaving the main event around 9 p.m. and entering her cabin. They didn't emerge until this morning. The words hung in the air like evidence in a trial I hadn't realized was happening. I'm not saying this to upset you, Jessica continued. I'm saying this because I've seen this pattern before, and I think you deserve to know what you're dealing with. This isn't just about a missed hospital visit. No, I heard myself say. It isn't. When you're ready, we should talk about your options. Kevin's behavior potentially violates several company policies regarding workplace relationships and honest reporting to HR. But that's for later. Right now, please just rest. After she hung up, I lay back against the hospital pillow and closed my eyes. 8 months of Megan's emergencies suddenly made perfect sense. The expensive lunches, the late nights, the cologne and the careful grooming. Kevin hadn't been helping a struggling colleague. He'd been conducting an affair in plain sight, using work as the perfect cover story. Emily returned with coffee that tasted like disappointment. She took one look at my face and set the cups down carefully. What happened? Jessica sent security footage from the retreat. Kevin spent last night in Megan's cabin. My sister didn't say I told you so. She didn't need to. Instead, she sat down, took my hand, and started making phone calls. The lawyer, a locksmith, a moving company that specialized in what she called efficiency situations. Within an hour, she had my entire divorce choreographed. The hospital discharged me 3 days later. Emily drove me directly to her place in Colorado Springs, bypassing Denver entirely. The locksmith had already changed the locks on my house. The moving company was scheduled for Saturday, and Jessica Palmer had scheduled a meeting with Kevin in HR for Monday morning. I learned later what happened in that meeting. Jessica had presented the security footage first. Kevin's face had cycled through confusion, denial, and finally, panic. Then she'd produced my texts, the ones showing him dismissing his wife's emergency surgery for a presentation that turned out to be mediocre at best. The company takes workplace relationships seriously, Jessica had explained, her voice professional but cold. Especially when they involve dishonesty to HR, abandonment of family responsibilities that reflect poorly on our corporate culture, and conduct that creates a hostile work environment for the spouse who also works here. Kevin's face had drained of color when he realized both his marriage and his career were ending simultaneously. Megan Turner had resigned via email that same Monday, effective immediately. No 2 weeks' notice, no farewell party, no explanation. Just a brief message about pursuing other opportunities and a forwarding address in Arizona. She'd fled the state rather than face the consequences of what she and Kevin had built on the foundation of my marriage. Kevin showed up at my house 2 weeks later, finding Emily there instead of me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his confidence stripped away like paint in a storm. "I need to see Rachel," he'd said, according to Emily's gleeful retelling. "I need to explain. She doesn't want to see you. Your belongings are in the garage. You have 24 hours to collect them before they go to Goodwill. This is my house too. Actually, according to the prenup you insisted on, it isn't. The house was hers before marriage and remains hers after. Your lawyer should have explained that when you signed the divorce papers." I hadn't been there for the confrontation, but Emily had recorded the security camera footage. Kevin's face when he realized he was losing everything was almost satisfying. Almost. Mostly, I just felt tired. The divorce finalized 8 weeks later. Kevin had contested nothing, probably because his lawyer had explained how badly the security footage and text messages would play in court. Megan had blocked his number, according to mutual friends who kept me informed whether I wanted them to or not. The woman he'd thrown away his marriage for had disappeared the moment things got difficult. Jessica called me 2 months after the surgery, when I was back at work part-time. "I thought you'd want to know. Kevin's been let go. The investigation found he'd been falsifying his timesheets, claiming work hours that were actually spent with Megan. Combined with everything else, thank you for telling me. Rachel. I've seen a lot in 15 years of HR. What he did to you was one of the worst cases of spousal abandonment I've ever documented. You deserved so much better." 3 months after the surgery, I hosted my first dinner party since everything fell apart. My apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom I'd rented while the divorce house sale processed, was full of people who actually cared about me. Emily and her girlfriend, my coworker Melissa who'd found me on that bathroom floor, my neighbor Rosa who'd brought me soup every day for a week when I got out of the hospital, Jessica Palmer, who'd become an unexpected friend through the whole ordeal. We ate pasta I'd made myself, something Kevin had claimed I couldn't do properly. We drank wine from glasses that didn't match. We laughed at stories that had nothing to do with presentations or retreats or people who choose PowerPoint over promises. To Rachel, Emily said, raising her glass, who survived surgery, survived Kevin, and came out stronger than ever. To Rachel, everyone echoed. I looked around my mismatched apartment, at these women who had shown up when it mattered, who hadn't needed to be begged or convinced or scheduled around a presentation. This was what support looked like. Not empty words and prettier schedules, but actual presence in actual crisis. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Kevin had viewed my profile. Again, he'd been doing this every few days, a digital haunting that the block button couldn't quite solve because of our shared work history. I didn't click the notification. What was there to see? His profile probably still listed him as seeking opportunities instead of unemployed because he chose his affair partner over his dying wife. Some things couldn't be captured in professional language. 6 months to the day after my surgery, I walked past the conference room where I'd collapsed with my ruptured appendix. The same room where I'd crawled toward my phone, unable to reach Kevin because he was already busy with someone else. The memory was still sharp but no longer cutting. My surgical scars had faded to thin lines that looked like life marks, evidence of survival rather than trauma. My marriage was over, but I wasn't. That felt like the more important fact. I thought about Kevin occasionally. The way you think about a restaurant you used to frequent but that closed down. He existed now in the past tense, a character from a story I'd stopped telling myself. According to the network of mutual friends who kept me informed, he'd moved to a smaller apartment, was working at a lesser company, and had started therapy for what he called relationship attachment issues. The anger had faded months ago, replaced by something that wasn't quite indifference but wasn't forgiveness either. It was simply done, finished, a chapter that ended when he typed those words suggesting I take an Uber home from the ICU. Emily called me on my lunch break, her voice carrying warmth instead of the protective fury I'd heard for months. "How are you doing? Really?" "I'm good. Actually good, not pretending good." "I know. I can hear it in your voice. You sound like yourself again. The Rachel I knew before Kevin convinced you that you needed to be less. The observation hit with the gentleness of truth. I had been less, hadn't I? Less demanding, less present, less myself. All to accommodate a man who was never going to show up when it mattered, no matter how small I made myself to make room for his priorities. Saturday morning arrived soft and golden through my apartment windows. I made coffee for one, exactly how I liked it, and sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. No one needed me to be anywhere. No one was going to text asking me to handle their crisis instead of living my life. No one was going to make me feel guilty for existing in my own space. My phone buzzed once. A text from Jessica. Saw Kevin at a coffee shop this morning. He looked rough. Asked about you. I told him you were thriving, which seemed to physically pain him. Thought you'd enjoy knowing that. I smiled at my phone, typed back a simple thank you, and set it aside. Kevin's suffering wasn't my joy. Exactly. But there was satisfaction in knowing that actions had consequences. That choosing a presentation over your wife's emergency surgery had a price that couldn't be negotiated away. The scar on my abdomen twinged slightly as I stretched, a gentle reminder of everything I'd survived. Not just the surgery, but the marriage, the betrayal, the complete reconstruction of a life I'd thought was permanent. I finished my coffee and started making plans for the day. Brunch with Melissa. Afternoon yoga class. Evening call with Emily. A life built on foundations I'd chosen rather than accepted, decorated with people who actually showed up. This was what freedom looked like. Not dramatic or triumphant. Just quiet and true and entirely mine. If this story of karma catching up had you rooting for Rachel's recovery, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Jessica Palmer pulled up that security footage in the HR meeting, exposing Kevin's lies to everyone who mattered. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this one. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.